Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. The Mage Tower has faded back into the twisting nether to return during the next Legion Timewalking. And while it was up, I was able to get the Tower Overwhelming achievement, the meta achievement for completing the Mage Tower as every single class spec in the game. Back in Legion, I tried to get as many of the Mage Tower challenges done, but I could do a handful of DPS, only one tank one, and could never even do a healer challenge. This time around, I wanted to do as many challenges as I could. It started off with getting the transmogs for the classes I play the most. After a couple of mogs, I just had to go and get the Mage Tower mount week 1. Week 2, I spent getting the rest of the transmogs, and then for the last 2 weeks of the Mage Tower, I just did the rest of the challenges to see if I can get the meta achievement. Today I bring you guys my thoughts on the Mage Tower, as well as my thoughts on how Blizzard can improve it for the next Legion Timewalking. But right before that, most of you guys watching this videos are still not subscribed, and if you're watching this video anyway, you might as well subscribe as well as hit the bell, especially if you want to see more discussion videos like these, future updates for World of Warcraft like for patch 9.2, or even future expansion announcements. First things first, I was so glad that Blizzard decided to bring back this experience, this unique bit of content back from the vault, instead of letting it collect dust and just not getting any play. I just wish it was open all year round. There's a whole treasure trove of stuff that Blizzard has done in the past, some unique content that's no longer accessible in the game. Just like the Mage Tower, which I loved tremendously, I want to see older content brought back in a similar fashion. Blizzard has done some great stuff with Timewalking, bringing back older raids, dungeons, and now content utilizing the Timewalking scaling system, and I think they should continue investing more into that. When spending my time inside of the Mage Tower, it definitely felt like some specs have it easier for some of these challenge fights. Starting off with the Agatha fight, I thought that one was pretty well tuned, and I didn't really find too many issues as majority of the specs that I played. The Sigrun fight is a little funky, like Enhancement Shaman and Demonology Warlock do not get one shot, but the wave of Valkyr flying through the battlefield, whereas Rogue and Retribution Paladin and Mage do get one shot to that mechanic. Also, they added a berserk timer for this fight, so if you're taking too long, then you are gonna get overpowered by the bosses as the berserk and one shot you. This is still very doable, as you have to get a lot more aggressive with cleaving down bosses. Whenever you have them stacked together, this is where you want to save cooldowns in order to maximize your value. The Fell Totem, or the Two-Gar fight, the Tauren and the Worm, also wasn't all that terrible. It felt awkward for Destruction Warlock since there's a lot of mobility involved and you can't really stand still to cast a lot of your spells, but every single spec that does this fight had plenty of tools and plenty of time in order to be able to bypass this challenge. The Twins fight is far easier as a Frost Mage, Marksmanship Hunter, and Boomkin. And I would even argue it's pretty decently doable as a Affliction Warlock, even though you don't have the best kiting potential. But for Shadow Priest, this fight felt very punishing. This is not a great spec for kiting. Hell, Shadow Priests are not really a mobile spec either. They have some movement, but they get punished for having to move constantly. I've seen way too many ways that Shadow Priests have been able to cheese these fights. Even though Blizzard keeps fixing cheeses, players keep finding ways to do it, and that seems to be the easier way than actually having to play mechanics. Sounds to me like a simple fix where you just tune the fight a bit better for priests so they're able to play the intended mechanics instead of cheesing it every single time. The Xylem fight had probably the biggest swings between the specs that had it easy and the specs that had the most difficult in just part 1. Part 1 of this fight is just a big survivability fight. Surprisingly, warriors, rogues, and hunters have the best survivability for this part of the fight. Hunter gets a pet so you can soak a lot of the boss damage, warriors and rogues don't get hit by boss hard at all, and whatever little healing you get from talents is enough to bypass it. But Death Knight and Demon Hunter just get shrugged by the boss. The Death Knight can barely get by part 1 with enough healing, but it is a very tight healing check. But this guy just does criminal stuff to the Demon Hunter instead. You get hit the hardest with the Frostbolts and Arcane Barrages, and you have just the barest amount of healing in order to bypass this fight. You have the talent of Demonic as well as Leech from Metamorphosis, so during your meta, you are kinda survivable. Outside of that, you play the talent of Demonic Appetite, where your Chaos Strikes and Annihilates have a chance to carve a soul off of the boss. The heal from the soul is decent enough to get past the fight, but it's a very RNG since it's a chance to carve a soul. A ton of Demon Hunters I know just bypass this whole mechanic by running Crusader Enchant on a low item level weapon. Crusader Enchant gives you strength, which is a useless stat, but enough healing as well in order to be able to make this part of the fight basically mute so you can actually see part 2. This tells me this fight might need to be tuned a little bit for Heavy Demon Hunter for the damage they take to make it a little bit more survivable. The take fight was actually a lot of fun. The general strategy was to do as much damage in part 1 to make it easier in part 2, since you have to deal with less infernals knocking you back. I've heard a lot of players complain about the knockbacks, especially as classes that don't have mobility to get back on a platform like Protection Paladin, but I never found myself having that much of an issue. As long as you're constantly moving and are aware of your positionals, you should for the most part be able to dodge every knockback in that fight. It was very tough on the Guardian at first until I changed my strategy and started playing more of a hybrid build with Heart of the Wild, going into Boomkin form to do damage. This fight did see some nerfs for a handful of classes, but after those nerfs it felt pretty well tuned. Then there's the Healer challenge that was the hardest challenge of all of them. For that challenge I felt that Holy Pally, Resto Druid and Resto Shaman did well with all the parts of this fight. The Mist Weaver struggled a little bit in the damage aspect of part 1, but everywhere else it did fairly okay. I found the Holy Priest the hardest for me. It's just hard to do damage and heal at the same time. And burst healing I felt this spec was the weakest in. Monk, Paladin, Resto Druid, and Resto Shaman, I felt more comfortable dealing with burst healing, and that just might come down to my inexperience in this spec, but burst healing as a Holy Paladin just felt like it took more mana and more casts out of me. There was a little bit of weird tuning at the last part of this fight. For Restoration Shaman and Restoration Druid, the last part of the fight ended way quicker. During that part, you're expected to maintain your mana, rotate cooldowns, keep your party topped off, and keep yourself at roughly 30% health. It's a pretty challenging aspect of the fight where the boss will leap on top of you, creating a fell pool of green. Eventually, as he keeps leaping on top of you over and over, he'll eventually fill up the room full of green. So you're supposed to be able to slay the boss, keep your party topped off, and try to end the fight before the rest of the room is completely green. The Resto Shaman and Resto Druid didn't see the end of that fight. In fact, the boss died way before even half the room was filled with green. The Priest, Monk, and the Paladin all saw the room filled with mostly green or fully with green puddles. And I wonder if there might be some tuning necessary in order to make that last part of the fight a little bit more even, because it felt far easier as Restoration Shaman or Resto Druid. Overall, majority of the Mage Shower challenges were doable, some of them were really tight, and some felt very punishing. And I'm hoping that they will do some more tuning in the future to try to make some of the more punishing, more standout fights a little bit less so. But it's not just the class tuning we gotta talk about, we also gotta talk about the items we use inside of the Mage Shower. Some of these items were overpowered in making these fights easier. So let's start off with consumables. Consumables were huge for the Mage Shower. Your flask, potion, maybe augment ruin, as well as your food, and Shadowcore oil were almost mandatory. And for many of the fights, it felt like you really needed to have drums or bloodlust at certain parts of the fight. At the very start, Blizzard decided they weren't gonna let any borrowed powers be usable inside of the Mage Shower. So things like Azerite gear and the Trace themselves from BFA, the Legion legendaries, the Shadowlands legendaries of the Covenant system, or any of the older cheesy items were all disabled to make sure that the tower is a class challenge, but also so it's easier to scale and balance it in future expansions. So certain older items of great power were not allowed in the Mage Tower. However, that did not apply towards consumables. Potion of Unbridled Fury and even flasks from Battle for Azeroth had a way bigger impact in giving you extra value and extra damage than any of the Shadowlands items ever could. These items didn't let you bypass and stomp on the content, but they definitely let you get those DPS checks artificially without improving on your class gameplay. In future expansions we'll get even more consumables which could play differently inside of the Mage Tower. And there could be even more consumables that will be necessary or feel necessary in order to complete the tough parts of the Mage Tower. I suggest in the future they adjust the health of these bosses so you don't need consumables in order to be able to bypass some of the tight DPS checks, like lower the boss's health enough equal to the amount you would lose by not using drums inside of the fight. But also remove the ability for players to use consumables inside of the Mage Tower and make it really a class challenge rather than a consumables challenge. Same thing with cheesy gear. A lot of the gear with sockets was kinda helpful, especially if you can get some really overpowered big time sockets with huge stats, but the biggest items that had the most effect were some of the older raid trinkets, like the Cyclotronic trinket from BFA, the Seed Pod from the Emerald Nightmare, Gaze of Seath from Warlords of Draenor Hellfire Citadel, and the Ghost Iron Dragonling. For one reason or another, these trinkets did more damage than majority of the Shadowlands trinkets or any of the other scalable time walking trinkets for this instance. Like the consumables, these trinkets helped me get the DPS checks for many of my mage fights, and if Blizzard does nerf them in the future, which I could see that happen, hopefully they'll lower the boss health as well to account for this trinket nerf. Then there's enchants. There's in fact a lot of enchants you could put on level 50 and below item level gear, which gives you extra secondaries and even primary stats if you use some of the cheesier older expansion items. The armor enchants can be pretty helpful, but the one enchant that made the biggest difference, like we talked about earlier, was the Crusader enchant for demon hunters. In fact, any class that wielded Crusader for my Mage Tower challenges had a much easier time surviving through some of the tougher mechanics of the fight. As we mentioned earlier, Blizzard removed some of the borrowed powers of older expansions, and I could see them hit the Crusader enchant again in the future. If they do that, they should hopefully improve some of the tuning when it comes to survivability for some of the classes that felt like they needed that enchant in order to bypass some of the tougher parts of the fight. But that's going to be my video of my thoughts on the Mage Tower and how Blizzard can improve it. I'm still holding out hope that maybe Blizzard will re-enable the Mage Tower to be accessible 24/7. It's such good content and I feel like it should be enjoyed all year round, especially for players that are still struggling to get some of their challenges completed, whether it's for transmogs or mounts. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you enjoyed this kind of discussion video or found it informative, give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about everything we talked in this video? And how do you think Blizzard should nerf or change the Mage Tower going forward in the next updates? Thank you all so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Link towards our channel Discord is in the description of every single video. Join the Discord to join the community. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in the next one.